You are listening to the Information Security Innocent Podcast, episode 48, originally released on March 11th, 2021. As always, I'm your host, Josh Amishav. Today we have Paulino Calderón joining us. He first came on my radar a number of years ago when I read his book on Nmap NSC development. Paulino recently co-authored another book called Practical IoT Hacking, which is due to be released later this month. I had a sneak peek at the book and highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in a very comprehensive guide to finding vulnerabilities in IoT devices. My three main takeaways from our conversation were: 1, how to use protocol analysis to find bugs in IoT devices; 2, how to extend Nmap's functionality to discover new devices and protocols; and 3, how to get involved in the Nmap project. You'll enjoy those two things plus a bunch of other tips along the way. Direct support for this podcast comes from BreachSense. If you need visibility into your clients, employees, or third-party suppliers' breach credentials before criminals exploit them, then head on over to breachsense.io to apply for a free 7-day trial. And now here's my conversation with Paulino. Paulino Calderón, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi, Josh. Well, thank you for inviting me.
Hey, so it's great to have you here. So can you tell us a bit about who you are and what do you do?
That's the good start. Hi, everyone. My name is Paulino Calderón. I work in information security for the last 10 or 11 years. My actual place of work is called WebSec. It's a company that I actually co-founded in 2010. And we focus on offensive security. So a lot of my work has been around network and application security. And I've contributed to some open source projects. So that's probably why you know me. I've been contributing to Nmap since I think 2011, and I've been also involved in other OWASP projects. Like I'm the chapter leader for OWASP Riviera Maya, and we help organize one of the stops in that tour. And so we do the Mexico conferences, and also I'm the co-leader of OWASP IoT Goat, which is like a vulnerable OpenWRT framework to test IoT vulnerabilities, and and a bunch of other smaller things. Like I'm pretty random, so I also run like a cafeteria. I recently got into fishing, so I bought a boat, and I'm kind of been going fishing for last month. I don't know, a little bit of everything.
Wow. So you run exploit code a day and run a cafeteria at night. That's awesome. So can you tell us how did you get involved? How did you get involved with Nmap?
It was part of a program called Google Summer of Code, which is actually a great program, great opportunity for everyone. I was finishing college at that time, and it gave me the opportunity to work with professionals, which I learned a lot from them. Like some of those guys are still crazy. Like I still learn a lot from them. And so I started like a student for Nmap during that project. So what this program does is they will sponsor you to work on open source projects during your summer, which is supposed to be your vacation, so when you're free. And they assign a mentor. And at that time, Fyodor was my mentor. So I got pretty involved in Nmap. And after that program, I kept contributing. So the years after that, I became a mentor for other students. I've been a mentor twice or three times with Nmap, and then I didn't even know that I was going to be involved as an organization as well. So in this program now, I've been the student, the mentor, and the organization with my OWASP IoT Goat project. So I guess I can recommend the program for everyone because you could be an undergrad or PhD student, and also if you have a project that is open source, you can also submit it, and if it gets approved, you'll get students to collaborate with you, and they'll get paid, and it really helps to speed up development. So that's how it started.
What was your focus on when with the Nmap development?
I started working at that time. We didn't have, well, we did have an HTTP library, but it was still on, it has a few things that it needed to polish. But I started with the HTTP protocol, and I guess at that time I was also working on the web crawling module, the HTTP spider aspect of that. And then it kind of became for vulnerability detection. I was working with my students on vulnerability detection. Yeah, basically around that. But my last work was related to medical libraries, medical imaging. So a bit of DICOM. Before that, I helped with the SMB 2 and 3 port in Nmap. So I don't know, it's been some time.
With the medical devices, one of the things that you come across when you scan IoT devices, sometimes you'll kill the device, knock it over, and if it's a light or a connected, I don't know, some random connected device in your home, probably doesn't matter. But medical devices, how do you deal with that?
Start by being very careful. Like, do not scan it. Full port scan, aggressive virtue detection. Do not enable everything because it is very noisy. And yeah, if you look up for the hashtag kill by Nmap, you'll see a lot of posts on Twitter that different devices that get killed by it. So a lot of the stacks, I guess, they're too fragile. They're not. It should be like a finding, right? If it crashes and it doesn't come back, it should be like, oh, you know what? This is just the network stack is too shitty. No, you need to fix it. But no, in reality, people will get pissed off. You'll be in trouble if you break something that is not coming back up online. So what we do, same with ICS and SCADA systems, just be really careful. Like tone down the amount of probes and traffic that you're sending. So limit the amount of the parallel probes that you send, and also do not do the full port thing because sometimes they just run out of memory. So keep on the ports that are interested for you or that you could take advantage of that because there are some exploits or you could do some recon on those ports. But yeah, just start. Um, don't go too hard on production networks. Definitely, when I was doing my medical, the prototyping and all of that, I was working with emulators, so I didn't risk breaking something for real. And that's also interesting because when you work on emulators, you expect the protocol to work as the RFC states, right? But then in reality, you see that a lot of implementations do not follow it, and that I think that's the tricky part about writing network protocols or programs that communicate with them. And that's how you find bugs too, because sometimes you'll see like, oh, this is not doing what it's supposed to do, and then you realize, oh, this is crashing. Why is it crashing? It becomes kind of like a hunt.
Cool. So one of the interesting things that Nmap does in terms of its choice of programming languages, it uses Lua for NSC scripting. It posts, I guess, the hotness using Go or Ruby or Rust. How does why Lua, and how does it compare to development in other languages?
I like it because it's very fast. It's very fast for you to learn it, and it's very. Most of the libraries are pretty robust, so a lot of the work it's already there. And when I was using it for offensive security, I noticed basically no ABs are looking for Lua stagers. So if you wanted to use it for malicious purposes, it's also pretty undetected at this moment. And you can even do things like I don't know, like DLL hijacking, or thread processes, star processes. It's kind of neat that you can do all of that, and the size of the interpreter is very small. I've also used it with Wireshark, and it's a lot faster to write something in Lua than in C or C++, right? So I think the value is definitely the speed that you can start working or creating something and have something that can actually communicate with your protocols. Um, like that's the value of it. That's the best part. But I would like to see it more though. I feel like it's not really widespread enough. Like I see it everywhere though. Like it's in a lot of signature based stuff like CMs, other technology, games even, right? Like for scripting things, I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I don't see too many other tools using it for like exploit development, but yeah, it should be. I mean, it's a great language.
Yeah, I saw that Mascan is implementing it. They're running their modules in Lua as well. So they're basically doing something similar to the Nmap scripting engine.
Cool. All right, so IoT kind of forced traditional manufacturers to become software development companies practically overnight, which brings with it a large number of security issues. What are the common threats you see to IoT devices?
It's crazy how insecure they are. Like all their techniques, it's very fun to actually hack these devices because it's easy. And that's the scary part too, because if it's too easy, then the expertise, the skill level that you need to attack those devices is very low. So it's very accessible for basically any cyber criminal that wants to target. The industry has done a lot of efforts, especially in the US. They have accepted some regulations that are about to start putting pressure on the vendor side of things. But I don't know, for example, in Mexico, the industry is not really regulated. People are going to still come up with products on their own, IoT. It's very, I don't know, users are incentivized to create their own prototypes of things, and they're selling them, and they're obviously not going through the security procedures that they should be. Like it's not secure enough. The dangers are it's it's insane how some of these are completely mitigated in other types of devices on operative systems. So we're kind of like going back a little bit, even though we have all the defenses or all the mechanisms there, we're not implementing there. It's pretty wild out there at this moment. For example, next week I'll be sharing details of a simple smart water bottle. I got the smart water bottle because because of legal reasons we couldn't show a a pump for the heart, so insulin pump. Sorry. So it was BLE Bluetooth enabled. So it was a lot simpler or easier to demonstrate some attacks on this smart water bottle. So I was just expecting to find the usual non-authenticated stuff, non-encrypted, that I could see the data, modify the data, maybe spoof that I'm drinking enough water. So I was just expecting to find the usual stuff that I could imagine on a water bottle, but it became a lot worse than I expected because once I started looking into it, it seems that the water bottle kept sending a beacon every 2 minutes or 5 minutes, I can't remember, but it was like pretty frequent, and it will update your position, your location on their web services, and but that information wasn't accessible to the user at all. So it was just like a thing that they were doing on the background. And when I checked those web services, it turned out they were completely vulnerable. Like the database had like no protection, SQL injection everywhere. You could see like all the users locations at that time, and it included personal information like height, weight, uh, even things that are not really related to like just a smart water bottle. Why would you need to know my sexual preferences? Like it's not part of the functionality, but the information was there, and it was just out there. People, I tried to report it, and for 6 months I couldn't get a hold of anyone. So I basically just gave up, and I was hoping that was like a year ago, and I was hoping that by now the water bottle was out of the market, and probably was a smaller startup company which didn't go further than that. But no, to apparently they come up with a newer model, and they're still selling them, and it's those are the small things that if you carry a small bottle of water, you will not expect it to be sharing your location with everyone and all that.
That's insane. So when you have an IoT device as a security practitioner, what kind of like if you're doing threat modeling, how does that look for IoT?
Yeah, it's actually a good exercise. We're coming up with a new book about IoT security. It's called Practical IoT Hacking with No Starch. And there's a whole chapter about threat modeling IoT products with that. I didn't work on that specifically, but it's similar to what you do with threat modeling on other products. The only thing that we need to consider is that the attack surfaces are different. You're not going to have your typical web application. You have maybe radio, maybe different types of communicate hardware. How can you communicate with the hardware? Is the information or the secrets stored securely, or can you dump the firmware and do further analysis on that? Yeah, it's a lot of variables at this point.
So yeah, that kind of leads into the next question I was curious about. When you approach, let's say, a web app or a mobile app, there are some very defined testing methodologies that you would use. But like you mentioned, IoT can be part web app, part infrastructure with the backend servers, and part, I don't know, has a radio on the device. And how does that? How does the testing differ? Is it just each one has its own component and a list of tests that need to be done, or is there some middle ground that it's a mix and match of different methodologies?
No, you definitely need to use different methodologies. One, whatever fits best for each component, and that's the beginning. You need to divide your system by components, see what you need to test in specifically in each one of them, because yeah, the testing tools and methodologies are going to be different with each component. It's it has grown the industry around IoT security a little bit more regarding methodologies and things like that. For example, OWASP itself has come up with at least two or three new projects. One of them is about specifically about firmware testing methodology. They've also done a lot of work improving the top 10 risks for IoT. So you need to consider those, and obviously a lot more than those because it varies a lot from device to device. You need to think about as an attacker. You need to see how would you attack this and break down the components and start hacking them with whatever you have to. And I think that might be the most challenging part with IoT. Sometimes they're very hardware specific, and you might not have the equipment at hand, and it's an unknown protocol for you, but you do have experience in security testing, so you just need to understand how it works and how the information flows from one side to another. So in order to attack them, or at least so you come up with ideas on what attack could work. And that's one of the interesting parts from our book, because we focus a lot. We try to share our thought process and methodologies in these various aspects during IoT testing. So you will see the threat modeling section, for example, but we also share our methodology for testing network protocols for mobile applications. Even though all web has already a pretty solid one, um, we come up or we share our little secrets there.
Okay, so how do you mentioned before that you use Nmap to as part of the protocol discovery process. So can you walk us through when you have an IoT device, you're capturing the network traffic, and then if you want to use Nmap to then scan the rest of the network for other ones, how does that process look?
I'll give you a particular example that I used to discover a vulnerability in a CCTV camera. At first, at first you always have to do full port enumeration, discover all the services in all the protocols. So when I did that, I noticed one of the services was running on a not port, and it was giving me device information, like very specific device information. At that time, I didn't think much of it, but when I was looking at the firmware, I noticed that inside the file system, the script that was in charge of returning that information was inside a protected directory, and in the calls you couldn't see. If you see the traffic, you will see that that page was being requested, but you couldn't see how they were authenticated to it. So by looking at the file system, I realized they had hard-coded credentials in the system call that they were using in the source code. So with those hard-coded credentials, I basically went back again to the service, noticed that yeah, it's they're pulling the information from there, they're using hard-coded credentials, and the credentials work in any device. So that was a finding that came up from a service that we identified with Nmap. But during a normal assessment, for example, maybe you know that a configuration file is exposed, or that they're using default credentials for a lot of the devices in the network. In Nmap, for example, you could do two ways. You have an HTTP enumeration script, and you also have one for default accounts. So the one for default accounts, it's very useful because it takes a table, a Lua table with usernames and passwords and the URL that it has to hit, and how to identify a positive and a false response. And that's basically it. So it takes you like 2 or 3 minutes to write that signature, and then use that module to run it, and you'll have all the results that you need without having to, write something for yourself that will take you more time than 2 or 3 minutes. It saves time that way. Also think about this. What do you do when you don't when there's a service running and you don't know what it does? The very first thing that you could try with Nmap is enable version detection to the top. So version detection of version all, or version detection level 9. And that what will do, it will send all the service detection pros to the service. So it doesn't matter what port numbers are defined in the version detection signatures file, it will send them all. So it will generate a lot of traffic, and maybe some of them will will generate a response that could give you a hint on what that service is. And even in some rare cases, when it's a shitty IoT device, it could even crash them because they receive unexpected data, and we're sending thousands of signatures to it, and it has broken some parsers in my experience in other products.
So, if somebody wanted to get started in NSC development, where do you suggest they go?
I will suggest they start. We have a lot of pending issues. Myself, have been a little bit away these past months. If you go to GitHub on the Nmap project, you will see a lot of pending issues or scripts or modules. Start working on those. It's very easy to pick up the language by just looking at other people's scripts. I think it's the faster way. And work on those issues. You'll probably find that it's easier that way. But if not, there's hundreds of resources for Lua specifically. And then in Nmap, we don't have that many resources. But for example, you can find the documentation at nmap.org is great. That's the starting point for everyone. Sorry, nmap.org/NSE doc. But I don't know. I guess it's about practice, like everything.
I was going to say I highly recommend a book called Mastering the Nmap Scripting Engine. Not sure if you've heard of it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that works as well. But what that book covers is basically what I've told you. We break down scripts and we show them the most basic tasks that you often come up, like how do you transfer data? How do you read data back from a socket? If you do need to use regular expressions, what do you have in Lua? What are you supposed to, what libraries are common that you probably need to use them? If you need to debug something or print information or format information in a certain way, what libraries are there? So a lot of those things are covered in the book, but they're also in the documentation. So if you go over the scripts, you'll find that exact same information.
Awesome. Okay, and just for your practical IoT hacking book, who's the target audience for that?
The target is anyone who's in security or looking to get into security, who wants to start hacking IoT devices, because we cover a lot of the protocols that are used right now. For example, the chapter about LoRa has some pretty interesting stuff with attacks that are not really well known, and even the tools are pretty early development. So there are a lot of bugs, and it's very like time consuming to do, right? Like there are a lot of things that are not dependent. that you need the technology to work first in order to attack the other device. So anyone who wants to yeah, become familiar with protocols used right now with IoT security, and also anyone who has already hacked IoT devices and want to for learn a little bit more, because once you start doing it, you pick up some secrets, or not secrets, just secrets from trade, right? You're doing it every day. So there are little things that that it will be helpful for other people, and that's what we try to share in that book.
Awesome. Okay, and finally, you mentioned that you started a website. So, as an entrepreneur, do you have any advice to other folks who want to start their own thing?
Oh, I encourage everyone to try it. I think the industry is growing a lot. If you have good ideas and a good team, it's definitely worth trying it. My advice will be, at least for me, it was not the technology aspect. It was the taxes. So my very first advice will be, get a good accountant and a good business manager, because as technology people, we tend to focus too much on the technology aspects of things, and businesses are hard not because of the technology aspects involved in them. It's just like things that you learn, but it's very. We have to focus on the operation, right? So it's more operational based than anything else. In security, there are a lot of resources, especially now. When I started, there weren't that many, but now you can even get. There are a lot of funds interested in funding new startups. So if you have good ideas or a solid product that you think it would work, try knocking on those doors, because the resources to get it done, they're out there. The tricky part is actually, as anything else, where you have to get it done. That's the hardest part. But once you have the determination, I would say go for it. It has worked out for me. I did a whole career at this point now.
One of the things that you mentioned before we were talking, I asked you what your superpower was. You mentioned that, like you said, shapeshift, and you have the ability to go deep into offensive security and the defensive security, and then also talk to executives about those issues. And on the same theme of, as a technical person starting a business, do you have any tips on how to do all those roles and do them all effectively?
Yeah, just what I think about all the time is focus on the business. What people care about, it's not really the technology. The technology helps get things done, but what they're really interested in is how it affects their businesses. So put yourself on their shoes. Don't be afraid of bringing the bad news. Sometimes they need to hear them, and that's why you are hired. They don't want you to sugarcoat everything and tell them, oh, you did great. I do support when you, especially when you're giving bad news. I do support that you share them the good points and not just bad news. But it's not about sugarcoating them either. They need to hear the harsh reality of where they are, if it's bad or not, and they appreciate that, because you put yourself on their shoes. You understand that it's not feasible to go patch all these systems, but business wise or operational wise, this could affect you this way, and after a risk assessment or whatever, are you willing to take that risk, or just put yourself on their shoes and try to think about the business more than the technology aspect of things. And why is that company operating? Are they producing milk or whatever? No, what are their goals, and why did they hire you? Because a lot of times you are hired because it's a regulation, so it's just a checklist that they need to fill at the end of the year. And if you come up with things that are too radical, they're not gonna do them. They basically just want to, do the checkbox and get it over with. So just remember that you're trying to bring them value. So if you see, what has worked for me is, that I don't think I limit myself to what I was hired for. So whenever I see some new areas of improvement, I will talk to them and I will, you know, I'm not here because of this, but I think you should consider this for the future. Not, I'm not saying that do this with me, but you definitely should consider this in your plan. Just make yourself as valuable as you can in the little brief time that you have with them, because that's another thing with consultants. We basically jump company from company to company like every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The assessments are very like short, so try to make the most out of their time with them, and they'll appreciate it.
Awesome. Great advice. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, no problem. Thanks for inviting me. It was about time that we meet in person or face to face.
Yes, definitely. All right, that's it for this week. If you have any comments or questions, then tweet at me at Jamoose. And if you got value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. See y'all next week.